Today's video is just going to be a video of me sitting here telling you a story. This is a story that to be honest, I have a difficult time telling. I've not told too many people this story over the years, but it's a really important story and I think that I need to get it out. The story for today is about a time that I got a man to admit that he had been molesting his 15-year-old daughter. There's a lot of reasons why I think this story is important and that I want to tell this story. Part of the reason is because I want to share this story so that other people that potentially are in a very similar situation know that they're not alone going through this. I also want to show that sometimes police officers uncover things that they were not expecting when they're dispatched on a completely unrelated call. As well as, some of the techniques that we use to actually be nice to people in order to calm them down, and some of the benefits of doing that, because that is something that I think it's one of my particular strong suits, if I'm allowed to say that about myself. So the story itself, I can't even tell you how long ago this was. I want to say it's probably 7, 8, 9 years ago. I was working third shift, and I could probably find the address if I really wanted to. I was dispatched on a call about a suicidal man with a gun who was threatening to kill his wife and 15-year-old daughter. My buddies and I all rushed to this call, lights and sirens. We all arrived at the house at about the same time, jumped out of our cars, and sprang into action. The first couple guys went to the front door. I was probably third or fourth in line of the trail of cruisers. That meant that it was my responsibility to get to the back door. If we had a man who was threatening to kill his wife and daughter and himself, there's always a chance that he's just going to kill his wife and daughter and try to run, or that there's a man that's armed with a gun that's making violent threats towards others, that when the police arrive, he's just going to decide to run altogether. So it's important that somebody covers the back door. The other two officers ran towards the front door and took up positions where they could watch the front door and front window, secure the house while we waited for more officers to arrive on scene so we could start calling the suspect out of the house. I tried to get to the back door, and there was a 6-foot privacy fence. I couldn't get around the house that way. I ran in front of the house to the driveway. That side of the house was also blocked by a privacy fence. So I ran back to the original side that I was on, went to the neighbor's house, because often you can get the neighbors won't have a fence, or they'll have a shorter fence. And I needed to get into that backyard as quickly as possible, or at least get to where I could see that back door as quickly as possible. The next yard also had a fence, and then the next yard had a fence. Then I started making a decision, okay, am I going to go back to the original yard, hop the fence, how am I going to get into the back of this house? And mind you, this took approximately 20 seconds. This running around, we arrived on scene. We're trying to get set up as quickly as possible. As quick as we can get this house secure, the better the odds that we're going to be able to resolve this situation safely without any uses of force, and just safer for all parties involved. As I was scrambling around trying to get into the backyard of that house, the front door flies open and the man comes out yelling at officers. I don't think he had his hands up at the time. So there's two officers at the front of the house. They're both standing off of the porch with their guns pointed at the door, waiting for the suspect to come out, who it was armed, at least according to the call. And they start screaming at him to put his hands up, turn around, face away, walk backwards to the sound of our voice, all these other things. And the guy was not cooperating with the officers. He had his hands up and he was like, F you, just shoot me, blah, 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 that kind of stuff that people do. He continued to walk towards officers. They ended up just tackling him. They grabbed his hands, forced him to the ground, put him in handcuffs. And it was a loud verbal dispute that occurred right then and there. The guy was screaming and cussing at the officers. They were screaming and cussing back at him. Adrenaline was high. It was a very high intensity situation. They were rolling him around, searching for weapons, found out he didn't have any weapons, and then walked him over to put him in the car. When they were asking for his information, he was refusing to give his information. He was belligerent, drunk, irate, just being an asshole altogether. And so the officers put the guy in the trunk, and I walked up to see what I could do. At that point in time, there had been a lot more officers that arrived on scene and had run towards the house. They had the mother and the daughter safe. They went into the house, and there was a firearm in the floor in the middle of the living room. So they had the firearm secure, they had the suspect secure, and we had the potential victims also secure. So it was a win-win all around. The one statement that the mother made was that her husband was on probation or parole or something for a burglary or robbery. I can't quite remember. And that immediately struck a tone with the officer, saying, oh, this guy is prohibited from owning a firearm. He is now under arrest. If he's not going to cooperate with us so he can tell us about his suicidal statements, we're just going to arrest him for weapons under disability, take him to jail. Done deal. They began to get his information from the wife and daughter, and they were getting ready to call up to the gun crimes unit to start the process for arresting this guy. After all, he had just threatened people. He was being an asshole. He's definitely not going to kill himself if he's in jail, at least not with a firearm, or the chances are a lot less that he's going to do something while he's in jail. So they start the process. Like, you know what? We don't have to take him to the hospital. We'll just take him to jail. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. We're out of here. I walked into the situation as they had made all of those decisions, and the guy is still in the back seat of the cruiser, yelling and screaming and kicking and doing all of the things that people like him do. I went up and asked the mother and daughter what was going on, and they're looking at me just wide-eyed. They were panicked. They were terrified. They were crying. They didn't know what to do or say. They just confirmed that he had a gun, he was threatening to kill them, and that they were scared. Again, arrestable offense, good to go. I talked to the guys and said, hey, what is he saying about this? They're like, oh, he's just being an asshole. He's not talking. But we don't need him to talk. He's under arrest. Now, this is where I kind of took over a portion of the run. And I was trying to help out the officers that were making the arrest. You often have like the good cop, bad cop situation. The officers that made the arrest had already kind of put themselves in a situation where they were like the bad cop, the angry cop, the mean cop. And the suspect who was in the back of the car was directing all of his hatred and anger towards those officers. I took that as an opportunity to go up and play good cop. This is a situation where we have a guy that's under arrest for a serious crime, a serious weapons offense, as well as he was threatening serious physical harm to his family members. So multiple serious violent offenses. And it was my job to go up and actually be nice to him. The reason I wanted to go up and be nice to him is because when someone is under arrest for a crime like that, you're going to be stuck with them for the next 2 to 3 hours. It's a lot easier if you're stuck to someone when they're being cooperative and in a relatively good mood than it is to put up with someone who is going to be fighting and screaming and doing all those things for that entire time. It's just not a fun experience. So I said, you know what? Those guys have everything under control. They have them under arrest. I'm going to go up and see if I can calm them down, make him believe I'm his friend. And that'll make the evening go a little bit easier for everybody involved. As well as made the experience slightly less traumatic for the wife and daughter that were up at the house. So I go over to the cruiser he was in. I go to the driver's side, open up the back door. He's sitting on the passenger side. And I put my foot up on the rear seat and, lean on my knee. And I talk to him like this. I'm like, hey, I'm Officer Ben. I just want to talk to you about what happened. Can you tell me what's going on? Initially, he's, F you, all this other stuff. I just continued to talk to him. I can't remember exactly what I said. He was like, I'm already under arrest. Why does it matter? And I said, I'm actually here to talk to you about your mental health. I heard that you were feeling suicidal, and I want to know the reason for that, because once you get out of jail on these criminal charges, you might still have some underlying mental health stuff that needs to be addressed. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to help you. And that's when he started to slowly give me some information. He was talking about, he's like, I just want to end my life. I can't deal with this anymore. It's too much and blah, blah, blah. I just kept pressing, tell me more about that. Why is that? And then one of the things that I ask everybody when they're in mental health crisis is I'll ask them something like, do you feel like this all of the time? Or did something happen today that is causing you to feel particularly bad? And that is when I actually got him to start talking. I asked him that question. I was like, did something happen tonight specifically that kind of triggered you and put you in this position where you became suicidal and, you know, you picked up a firearm and you were thinking about doing this, because that's not something that we want your family to go through. And he starts crying, and he just said, you know, I can't believe my daughter would accuse me of that. That came out of left field. I had no idea that that was coming. I had not gotten any information from the wife or daughter about any accusations. And I told him, I was like, you know, your wife and daughter haven't accused you of anything. What are you talking about? Why would your daughter say something that would put you in a position where, you know, you're doing all of these things? And then he said, well, she was accusing me of touching her. It's like, okay. And I think even when they make often these people, when they make an admission, they often add an excuse to it as well. And he said, she was accusing me of touching her, but it wasn't me, it was the dog. And I was like, that's very unusual. Why would your daughter accuse you of touching her if it was the dog? Can you tell me what happened? So that's when he goes into this long story. And his story was while he's sitting in the back of a police cruiser with his hands cuffed behind his back. His story was that his wife works second shift and she was out of the house. Him and his two daughters were home, or he and his two daughters were home. His one daughter was very young, and she went to bed early. She was upstairs asleep. His older daughter was 15 years old. He was sitting in his recliner. She was laying on the couch, watching, and they watched a movie together. He said that once the movie had gone on for some period of time and his daughter fell asleep, he goes into great detail about how she was laying on her stomach when she fell asleep. She had a blanket over her, and they have a small dog, like a small yappy dog. And he said the dog jumped up on her legs, and his description was vile. He said that the dog went up onto her butt and it started nuzzling and trying to cuddle with her on her butt. And he went into great detail about how intrusive this dog was being on his daughter. If I can say that without being too visceral with my description. And he said, you know, I got up from my chair, I walked over and I grabbed the dog that was touching my daughter's butt. And that's the moment that she woke up, looked at me and started screaming and ran up to her room. And then I guess immediately after that, the mother came home. So you've got dad trying to calm daughter down, who is hysterically screaming, and then mom gets home. Apparently the daughter told mom her perspective of what happened, and then mom got angry with dad. I believe they threatened to call the police, and that's when dad picked up the firearm. Dad picks up the firearm and says, don't do this. You know, I'm going to do this to myself. If you guys call the police, they're all in the front room. Big hysterical, crying, emotional situation. One of them ended up getting a hold of the phone, calling the police, and there we are. When I heard him tell me that story, I didn't believe his excuse. I didn't believe the thing about the dog. In my mind right then and there, he had just admitted that he was doing something to his daughter while she was asleep. I then said, okay, you know, thanks for telling me that. I'm going to tell the guys that, and we're going to try to get you some help. From there, I walked up to the porch where the 15-year-old daughter was standing, watching everything go down. And I didn't know how to delicately approach this situation. So I remember I walked up to her, said, hey, you know, my name is Officer Ben. I'm sorry that you're having this bad evening tonight. I just got done talking to your dad and I have some questions for you. And she was tearful, but ready to talk. And I said, you know, while I was talking to your dad, he made some comments that have me very concerned. He told me that he got out of his chair, came over to you because of the dog. And that's when her eyes could have shot through me at that point in time. Her eyes became wide open. She became incredibly angry. And she said it wasn't the fucking dog. I asked her to expand on that. And that's when she told me that she said she started right in the moment. Said it wasn't the dog. Said I was sleeping on the couch and I woke up and my dad was trying to put his hand inside me. This was not something I was prepared to hear at that point in time. I asked her if this has ever happened before, and she began crying harder and said yes. And then she just voluntarily started telling me about the night. It was probably like a Friday night or something. I don't remember for sure. But she talked about how her dad took her to the store, and while they were at the store, they went to the liquor store, and her dad goes and grabs this bottle of liquor. It was a bottle of liquor that at the time was being advertised on television a lot. It was a major hard liquor brand that had this new fancy bottle that they were trying to market. And I'm not going to talk about the bottle because it's not their fault that this happened. But he grabs this bottle and he turns to his daughter and says, "I've been looking for this everywhere. I'm so excited. I'm going to drink this tonight," you know. And so she knew that he was going to get hammered that night. And the way his eyes lit up, talking about this bottle and telling her about the bottle, she knew that he was going to get drunk and he was going to try to come after her that night. She said that when they laid down to watch a movie, they were on opposite sides of the room, and you could see the terror in her eyes as she's telling me this story, and all of the precautions that she took to prevent this from happening to her. She said that she was wearing an extra long t-shirt and a pair of pants, so that, you know, rather than a nightgown or something, to try to prevent this from happening, to dissuade her dad from doing something to her. She went through this entire process knowing that mom was out of the house, dad was going to be drunk, and that he was going to be trying to do something to her. I then went to the mother, and I think I told an officer to stand by with this girl. Said, "Hey, can you come hang out with this officer? I'm going to go talk to your mom for a moment." I took the mother far away where the daughter and nobody else could hear us, and I said, "Hey, I've got to talk to you about some stuff going on between your husband and your daughter." That's when the mom started crying and told me that she was aware that this is going on and that this has been going on. I brought the two of them together to talk to me, and they told me about many occurrences, instances where mom was at work, dad and daughter were home, daughter gets in the shower, has to walk by mom and dad's bedroom on the way back to her bedroom. Dad's in the room with the door open, laying there, asking her to come sit on the bed with him. Lots of instances like this, and it had been going on for maybe a couple of years. This girl had been dealing with this since she was 13 years old. The things that he was doing to manipulate them and control them is kind of like the next part of the story that people need to realize. I see a lot of comments and stuff in the public about these kinds of situations, and they don't understand why these children don't come forward sooner. Whether it's a parent, a family member, like an aunt or an uncle, or a coach. You know, there was a story recently in Columbus. This is what really got me thinking about this, about a high school girls basketball coach that was indicted for having sex with many students over the years. After the indictment dropped, he ended up saving the taxpayers a lot of money, ensuring that there would never be a trial, and the victims will never have to see him alive again. Let's put it that way. People will comment on those things saying, you know, I don't understand why the victims haven't come forward sooner. Maybe they liked it, or, you know, something like that. It's the grooming and the manipulation that these victims experience is something that if you haven't been there, or at least seen examples of it firsthand, it's hard for you to comprehend. In this particular case, the mother and the daughter were, obviously the daughter was aware of it, but the mother was aware of it. The daughter was afraid to turn in her father, and the mother was unwilling to cooperate because they were afraid of losing their income being homeless and starving. That was the reason that they didn't come forward. And that was the manipulation that this father was doing to this family. And that was exactly what he was doing on that particular night, because it had gone to a boiling point and it was boiling over, and his manipulations were no longer working. His manipulation of saying, look, if you call the police, they're going to take me out of the house. They're going to put me in prison for the rest of my life. And you guys are going to starve to death. You're going to lose the house. You're going to be out on the street. That was the weapon the father was using against them. When it had boiled over, the next weapon that he used against them was their love for him. I don't know how you can still have any love in your heart for a person that has been doing those things. I certainly would not. I've cut people out of my life for less, but he was using that against them. He grabbed his firearm and he said, I'm going to do this. This is going to be your fault. And it put them in a situation where they ended up calling his bluff, thankfully. But they didn't want him to die. But they wanted him to stop, and they didn't know how to make him stop. Once they threatened that, he cranked up the manipulation. When we arrived on scene and they told us that he wasn't allowed to have a firearm, and they realized that we were going to arrest him, they told me that they still had no intentions whatsoever of letting us know about this abuse that had been happening. Their intention, which this is what a lot of people intend to do and they never follow through with it, was to grab their things and move out. When the father was in jail, they had every intention of grabbing their things and moving out and being on the run. Those are the kinds of plans that never work out. But that was the best plan that they had, because for many reasons, they didn't want to put their family through a trial. They didn't want to. It's crazy, the manipulation and the head games that these predators play, and they play themselves as the victim. This mom and daughter didn't want to embarrass this guy by coming public with these allegations. They didn't want to, quote unquote, ruin his life by making these allegations against him. So their plan was just to run away. I understand where people are coming from when they're in these situations. I understand why people don't come forward when they're in these situations, because going through a criminal trial and having to relive these experiences in the public eye, at least in front of a courtroom, even if a lot of the stuff, even if the general public doesn't see or hear your stories, it's still very difficult to relive this in front of a group of people. It's much easier to just bury it down deep. Unfortunately, and I also have experience with people who have gone through this when they were younger and never told anybody about it, and now they're adults. That thing that they buried down deep inside them that they vowed never to tell anybody, it's like a monster that's trying to eat its way out. And the consequences of that are probably more severe than the initial abuse itself. I have a lot of sympathy and compassion for people who have had these experiences and still have not come forward. But I know how bad it's tearing them up inside. I wish that I had a perfect solution. The best advice that I can give people, not having experienced it, but having watched these people, is that if something like this does happen, or you gain knowledge that something like this is happening, please come forward and allow the criminal process to proceed. Because I believe that that is the best way to start the healing process, so that this thing that happened to you at some point in your life doesn't turn into a monster that's trying to literally tear you apart from the inside. I think that's it for me today, guys.